All right, my friends, how are you? So we're picking up in this set of information with the idea that, in the Neolithic era, people are now residing in permanent towns, and those towns are going to grow into cities, and those cities are going to grow into city states, and those city states are going to grow into kingdoms, and kingdoms are going to grow into empires, right? And it all starts with a couple of people who aren't in those original tribal kinship units sticking together for various reasons. All right. So these earliest civilizations that are going to arise that have all types of religious and ethnic and government, individuality are going to rise up around early river valleys. And the reason is because the thing that allowed them to stay in permanent residences was agriculture. And agriculture, primarily more than anything else, provides a good, demands a good set of water. And so that water is going to be apparent in places that rivers are going to flow. So we're going to look at 4 different river valleys. So if you look here, and geography is going to always be our struggle. So if you look here, we're going to deal with the Nile River Valley, the Tigris and Euphrates, the Indus and Ganges rivers, and primarily the Huanghe, but also the Yangtze River. And these are going to be our 4 major early river valley civilizations: Egypt, Mesopotamia, Indus River Valley Civilization, often called Indian River Valley Civilization, and the Chinese River Valley Civilization, okay? And so these are going to be our 3,500 to 500 BCE. We're sticking a lot of stuff here over periods of time. Primarily for a long time, these places are developing independently, and then they're going to become connected through trades and markets and those types of networks. So we're going to look at, the shared characteristics that early river valley civilizations are going to have, even if they have a little individual swing on them all, okay? So when you open up your PDF is kind of going to look like this, all right? And it's going to have things like, what is a civilization? And you can type in here, right? What are the styles of political structures or the geographic patterns? So we're going to fill that in, and each one of these headings is going to be found on one slide that we're going to go through right here. All right, so you just follow along, and we'll go heading by heading by heading, and we will work through the shared characteristics of the early river valley civilizations. Doesn't do us much good to talk about specific civilizations if you don't know what a civilization is. All right, so in the top left-hand corner of your organizer PDF, you will see the question, what is a civilization? Civilizations are where surplus, in other words, having extra of stuff, creates the ability to have a population. They're going to come there because there's plentiful food, maybe plentiful protection from danger, or lots of access to water, who will adopt a specific social order. And social order can mean a lot of things. They may have shared religion. They may have shared ethnic backgrounds. They will share a government system. They don't all necessarily share all these things. It's just the things that are going to bring people together into these independent places that will become standalone civilizations. Okay? If you haven't got that all typed up, it's the beauty of the video. You can pause. All right? So, geographic patterns. The number one thing that all of these places are going to have in common are rivers, because rivers are going to provide all of that fresh water for people to be able to both drink and feed livestock, but also water crops. They will also have rich soils. Many of these rivers are going to flood, and when they flood, they bring good soil up to the land that makes it possible for agriculture to create a surplus product. Water for irrigation. Irrigation is going to first start in Mesopotamia. The idea of irrigation is to carve channels into your fields that will deliver the water that is necessary for agriculture. But all of these places are going to adopt a form of, irrigation. They are also areas that tended to be protected from nomadic invaders. You've got all these groups that have not adopted the markers of civilization or unified governments, or are not living in agricultural collectives. And so a lot of these places, they're going to thrive and become important, are going to thrive because they have mountain ranges that protect them, or deserts, or seas, or oceans, okay? Mesopotamia is going to be a big exception. They do not have good protection. That's why people like the Hittites, the Amorites, the Hebrews, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Sumerians, the amount of people that lived in the Mesopotamia region is going to blow your mind. It's going to change dozens and dozens of times, but the civilization's foundation is built there, and it's going to remain, okay? But that's because they had no natural protections. All right, so what will be the social structures of these places? Well, primarily, they will start developing hereditary rulers. If you are a hereditary ruler, it means that it is passed down through families. All right, so I'm hoping y'all just know the word hereditary. Hereditary rulers. Examples would be kings, the pharaohs that we're going to learn about in Egypt, and pharaohs would create dynasties where it's passed down, hereditarily through generation after generation, fathers, sons, grandchildren, et cetera, et cetera. There will be an entrenching of gender roles in these civilizations that you did not see in the Paleolithic times, but you are going to see in the civilization times. And mostly it has to do with the fact that agriculture, the brutish work tends to favor, the construction of the male body over the female. And they start locking in these gender roles. Now, in hunter-gatherer societies, definitely not true. Some people would hunt, some people would gather. There's nothing that contains one person or the other. But this is sort of the structure of where we get an entrenched disparity between men and women in society has to do with agriculture. Rigid class systems. People are either within the favored group in these civilizations or not. And that could be for religious reasons, ethnic reasons, hereditary reasons, etc. But you start seeing that in these civilizations. And as the greatest expression of that is the idea that universally within these ancient civilizations, slaves and slavery were accepted. Labor in agriculture becomes a commodity. If someone is defeated in war and you capture the people of that other group or kingdom or civilization or tribe, their labor is a commodity that you have captured, and slavery becomes a norm in the ancient world. Political structures. You will get the world's first states. Now, I know as Americans, when we say states, you guys are almost always going to think of Delaware or Virginia. States are just a term for a bordered political unit, okay? So it has a term outside of America's usage of it. But it starts, just like I told you in the beginning of this video, from tribe to village to town to city states. City states that rule absolutely within there, have a defined government structure. To kingdoms, all right? Kingdoms would be a collection of, cities and city-states all under a supreme king. To the last iteration, which is empires. Empires is when one supreme ruler is going to rule over a collection of kingdoms. People that perhaps do not match them religiously or ethnically or through a whole lot of other externalities, but they're going to or linguistically, their language, but they're going to still rule over top of them, all right? So you have centralized governments. That means that there is generally one supreme grand poobah, one king, one emperor over a bureaucracy of under rulers that would make smaller or localized decisions. We're very familiar with this. In the United States, we have a president. Under the president, we have governors. Under each governor, we have et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, on down the line till you get to your local sheriff. All right. Now, what's very different about these centralized governments, it's often based on religious authority. You know, I mean, sometimes people would say, you know what, it's easy to disobey a man. It's hard for people to disobey the gods. And so if you look at like China, you know, China says that their emperors were chosen by the gods. It's called the mandate of heaven. If you look in Mesopotamia, you know, the kings and emperors were, you know, chosen by the gods. In in Egypt, they believed the pharaohs were gods. So being able to use, you know, religion to place a layer of control over the people was something that was almost universally found in these early civilizations. Okay. You would also start to get the world's first written law codes. In a complex civilization, there will be complex rules. You can't just go to your neighbor's house and take whatever you want. Maybe you're not free to speak any language you want, or, you know, educate yourself into any trade, or have freedom of movement out of your civilization. Important examples of this will be Hammurabi's Code. That is the oldest record of written law we have. And another famous set of written laws that comes out, you know, in this time frame are the Ten Commandments, which are laws that were passed for the Hebrew people by, you know, ostensibly their leader, Moses. And his authority was based on religious authority. So something you're familiar with, and then you can see it echoed in this time period. Okay. Do keep in mind, you can pause if you need a second, okay? Religious customs. All right, the norm for the entire history of the human species is to believe in many gods, and that is called polytheism. Polytheism, belief in more than one God. It is practiced by most ERVCs. It is practiced by most humans throughout history. Now, an incredibly influential development is going to show up in this time, and that is belief in a single God. All right, and that is called monotheism. And when we talk about the Hebrews and the Jewish people, we will talk more deeply about monotheism. Monotheism is a belief in one God, and it appeared from time to time in history. Even though, as far as the survival of the belief set and the influential nature of the belief set, it is generally credited to the Hebrews, who would later become the Jewish people. Okay? So think about the sort of logic of polytheism at that time. You know, so if you lived in the desert, you might believe in the gods of the dust clouds. You know, you might believe in the storm gods if you lived in the desert. But when you left and you traveled to a place that has volcanoes, or you travel to a place that has oceans or tornadoes, you don't necessarily not believe in those gods. You see that awesome power. And so people would, you know, accept the idea that there is a polytheistic reality, lots of gods for lots of scenarios. The Jewish people, or the Hebrews, are going to create the idea that their God can be portable, that they can take their God with them where they go. You know, if you were in the ancient world and you lived on the beach and there was an angry sea god who kept drowning your family members with tidal waves, if you moved away from the sea, you weren't scared of that God anymore, or you necessarily didn't have to obey that God anymore because that God was somewhere else. And that's going to change with monotheism. And you can track the rise of monotheism to sort of the rise of huge empires that had these single all-powerful rulers. You can see some interplay in between those things as history moves forward. Okay? Language and writing. All right? Language exists in a couple of forms. There are pictograms where you would draw a picture to stand for something. So, for instance, what is that? That's a pictogram. But you know what it means. It means sun. All right? That's a pictogram. An ideogram gives you the idea of something. You don't necessarily draw it, but it gives you the idea of it. So, for instance, That's water. I didn't draw water. I drew 3 squiggly lines, but it gives you the idea of water. And so you can start, interpreting meaning from written symbols, right? The last thing that's going to develop is going to be the phonogram, which is where a sound will help you make words so that you can create complex messages, all right? So let's look at language and writing. And you guys are incredibly familiar with pictograms. Every single emoji or emoticon you have ever shared is a version of a pictogram. There are 3 famous languages that in this unit you guys will have to know and remember, okay? Those 3 famous languages are cuneiform, which was invented in Sumer. Cuneiform means wedge-shaped. It is the mother of all written languages. It is the oldest language on earth, the first one that was created to be written down. And you can recognize it because wedge shape. Cune, wedge, like a cone, and form, shape, right? So anytime you see something that has these little cones and dashes, that is cuneiform. These are cuneiformic writings that are down here at the bottom. Cuneiform, cuneiform, cuneiform. The next one is hieroglyphics. And most people are familiar with hieroglyphics. They come out of Egypt. This will be like the first time in my career as a teacher that I haven't made y'all draw all these, but don't know how to do it in this scenario. So hieroglyphics, if you see anything that kind of looks like a picture, chances are that this is a hieroglyphic. And hieroglyphics were Egyptian. They're incredibly complex. You see hieroglyphics here in the background of this. These are hieroglyphics. And for a long time, we didn't know how to read them, but we're going to learn how to read them because of archaeology. And when we talk about Egypt in our next class meeting, then I'll show you how we figure that out. The last one, which is a phonogram from the Phoenicians, is called the alphabet. And yes, it is the parent of the alphabet that I am using today to write these notes. Look up. I, Y, E, K, A, B, G. The Phoenicians will invent an alphabet, and their alphabet invention will be shared all over the Mediterranean world because they were sea traders. They take this alphabet with them, and other civilizations would adapt it to their spoken language. People like the Greeks and eventually people like the Romans. And it has grown into the alphabet system that we use today. Okay, that's the 3 languages that come out in this time period from about 3500 BCE, when civilizations first start rising up en masse in these river valleys, till about 500. All right, so we're good? We're good. Economic patterns. So all of these places are separated from each other, but they're going to all have things in common. And the first thing is this. We leave the Stone Age. We're not going to be in the Stone Age because people will, in all these separate areas, learn how to produce and use metal, and they will make metal tools and weapons. First bronze, and some of you may have heard of the Bronze Age, and then iron, and some of you have heard of the Iron Age, right? So stronger, sharper, more shapeable, and capable of helping you create the surplus of goods that is necessary for the thriving of civilization. So increased agricultural surplus, better tools, better plows, better irrigation, all right? They will also conduct increased trade by rivers. The more they produce, the more surplus they have, the more they have that they can trade. So the more they can interact with other people. And everywhere they go, they are not only taking the goods that they are producing within their civilizations, they are also taking the science, the knowledge, the art, the religion, all those things. That's cultural diffusion. All those things are flowing out of these civilizations to other places. Now, All of them travel by the rivers. I already told you the Phoenicians will travel by sea. They're a little bit of an outlier, but they're going to fit in here nicely when it comes to cultural diffusion and sharing information around the world. We will also get the development of the world's first big cities. And what drives these big cities are markets. Now, nothing's changed. If you want to get the newest, hot pair of Nikes, you don't drive down to Family Dollar in Farmville to pick them up because there's not as much variety in our stores or in our markets, in our commercial centers. You go to downtown Richmond because the cities are going to have the markets that are going to offer you the goods that you want. That's true back then as well. So cities are going to become hubs and nothing's ever changed. This is urban life growing up because of the economics of this time period. All right. So let's list these ERVCs that we're going to deal with. First, we are going to talk about Mesopotamia. All right. I'm going to send you a copy of this map. All right, because you are going to need to know this geography. Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia is built around two rivers. It is built around the Euphrates River, which is this one, and it is built around this river, which is called the Tigris. All right, and it is built up in this big swath of good farmland in the middle of a lot of deserty stuff. Right here, and that swath of farmland is called the Fertile Crescent. And when we talk about Mesopotamia individually in our next class period, we'll talk a little more about that. We have Egypt. Egypt is built around the Nile River, and this is the Nile, okay? And then not in our next class, but in the first day next week, we will talk about this place, which is the Indus River Valley civilization. This is the Indus River, and this is the Ganges River, where the Indus will build. And remember how I told you that almost all of these places have natural protections, all right? Here we're going to start seeing that. You guys have already identified the Sahara Desert, where there's a whole wall of desert here that protects Egypt. There's a whole bunch of Mediterranean Sea that protects Egypt. And the Red Sea protects Egypt. The Indus River civilization is protected by the Hindu Kush Mountains on this side. And it is protected by the Himalaya Mountains on this side. This is early river Chinese civilization. This is China. And this is their river. It is called the Huanghe, or in English, the Yellow River. All right. Those are the four hearths of civilization, and we'll address what that means in the next class. But that's where culture flows out of because of their security, their safety, but also the fact that they have a chance to develop very big, complex civilizations and religions in these areas. China is also protected, obviously, by the Himalaya Mountains, by the Yellow Sea and Pacific Ocean on this side, but also by giant deserts right here. So you've got all this protection except for poor Mesopotamia. These are the ERVCs. I know that that your chart is on a PDF, but you should have been able to produce, something that, kind of goes down and fills out all of these various portions about the individual nature of these incredibly important civilizations. Thank you guys so very much. I appreciate your time, and I will see you at our next class period. Make sure that you check our class stream for an assignment that will help you start to look over the early River Valley civilizations. All right, so here is our complete look at early River Valley civilizations. All right. We named everybody out. Ooh, we didn't name the Hebrews and stuff. Well, we'll learn about them in a couple of days. Thank y'all. See y'all next class.